decades-old disappearances solved by the internet. The idea of brilliant amateur sleuths solving crime in their spare time has always fascinated people even before the internet is popular. Think Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys. Then the internet came along and suddenly everyone was able to participate with other so-called experts and armchair detectives. Internet sleuths for this case, however, did manage to solve a 40-year-old disappearance. This is decades-old disappearances solved by the internet. Paulette Jaster was born in 1954 and lived with her family on a ranch in Davison, Michigan. Paulette was known as a bright, pretty girl who was well-liked. In late August, Paulette left her Davison home to begin her studies at Central Michigan University, but she dropped out after the initial semester. Within the next few years, Paulette started suffering from mental health issues. Paulette had recently gone through a breakup with her high school sweetheart and had quit her well-paying job at the Chevrolet plant in Flint, Michigan. By 1974, Paulette was also suspected of using marijuana. In June of 1977, Paulette told the Davison police that people were trying to kill her and, quote, use her mind. When the police petitioned to the state saying Paulette was unable to care for herself, a county probate court deemed her mentally ill and sent her to a state hospital for evaluation and treatment. Paulette's sister believes Paulette may have been suffering from schizophrenia at the time. Today, such a diagnosis might mean medication and treatment, but during the 1970s, mental illness was often judged as a character flaw, not as a physical malady or a treatable body chemical imbalance. Less than 2 months later, Paulette, then 23, entered the state hospital and she signed herself out for the next year. Paulette came and visited her family's home in December of 1978, just before Christmas and after a fight with her father. Paulette left Michigan for Florida, where the family had relatives. Paulette would return home on April of 1978 for her mother's birthday. She would leave the family house 2 days after the birthday celebration and would never be seen again. She was last seen carrying an Army-style duffel bag and walking towards Interstate 69, not far from Davison. When her family did not hear from her for a while, they reported her missing. Police wouldn't find anything until almost a year later, when Social Security records show that in 1980, Paula earned $319 while working at Walgreens' lunch counter in Mesa, Arizona. Several witnesses would claim to have seen her in the last few months, but none of the sightings were ever confirmed. 6 more years would go by, and then in 1989, Paulette's sister received an anonymous call. The caller wouldn't say anything and hung up the phone every time she picked up. Paulette's sister believes it was Paulette herself checking in or just to hear her voice. 7 more years passed, and in 1996, Michigan State Police issued a new nationwide missing persons bulletin for any information regarding Paulette. The police would receive a call that claimed that Jane Doe from Minnesota could be Paulette. However, after forensic testing, she was ruled out. The case would once again grow cold, but her family never gave up searching for her. In 2014, Paulette's siblings began searching missing persons websites, including one called Web Sleuths, which is a forum where registered users can discuss and classify information related to crimes, trials, and unsolved cases, which they then tried to solve. The site led them to a woman named Debbie Saunders, who goes by the name of Houston Mom on Web Sleuths. Debbie was able to find a victim of a hit-and-run case from 1980 that had some similarities to Paulette. She submitted her findings to forensic scientist Dr. Sharon M. Derrick, who noticed the similarities as well. But without fingerprints or DNA, Dr. Derrick had to use unorthodox methods to identify the body. A comparison of Paulette's dental charts with the dental work of the hit-and-run victim was a match, but not an exact match. Because of the lack of x-rays, they had to make do with scanning an autopsy photo. While doing so, Dr. Derrick saw distinctive freckles on the woman's cheek. After comparing the 2 freckles on the woman's left cheek and one near the right eye to Paulette's sister, she was able to positively identify the victim of the fatal hit-and-run case. It was found that Paula had hitched a ride from Arizona to Houston and was seen getting out of an 18-wheeler at a truck stop on Interstate 10. Shortly before midnight on March 28, 1980, Paula had no identification on her when a car driven by an intoxicated driver swerved into her, killing her. However, the woman had a blue duffel bag that remained in the trucker's cab and stayed in his possession. The duffel bag detail was never verified, and the police never collected the bag from the trucker. According to a report from the Harris County Sheriff's Office, the young woman had been hit by Robert Escal Calick, who was 23 at the time. Calick was arrested and charged with failure to stop and render aid, along with involuntary manslaughter. He pleaded guilty to failing to stop and was placed on probation for 5 years. In July of 1980, Paulette had been buried in Houston and was known only as a series of numbers from 1980 to 2014. After the identification, her grave, which was previously marked with only a case number, was finally replaced with a plaque identifying her as Paulette Jaster with birth and death dates. Thanks to the internet sleuths and the persistence of Paulette's family, this case finally came to a close after more than 40 years. William Earl Moult. William Earl Moult was a 40-year-old mortgage broker from Florida, and on November 7, 1997, he went to a club in Lantana, Florida. William was not a heavy drinker and he rarely drank alcohol. He mostly kept to himself at the club and then left alone in his 1994 Saturn ASL. Around 11 p.m., according to witnesses, he did not appear to be drunk before he left the club. William called his girlfriend around 9:30 p.m. to say he would arrive home soon, but William did not make it home that night or any other night after the fateful phone call. He was later reported missing. Police searched for him but were unable to find any clues or any leads as to where he might be. With no leads to investigate, over the years, his case grew cold. He remained missing for the next 2 decades. Then on August 28, 2019, a former resident was looking at his old neighborhood on Google Earth in Grand Isle, Sausalito housing development in Wellington, Florida, when he noticed what he thought was a car in a retention pond. The former owner told the current resident, Barry Fay, that the car was there in a retention pond behind his house and sent screenshots to him. When Fay got home, he looked into the pond behind his house, but he didn't notice anything. Just he had noticed for the past 14 months that he had lived there. Fay called the neighbor who had owned a drone with a camera attached, and the footage it returned showed there was a car submerged in the pond. They called the Palm Beach Sheriff Office immediately, and the vehicle was pulled from the water. It was heavily calcified, and skeletal remains were found inside of it. Investigators towed the car away, and the remains were handed to the county medical examiner's office for examination and processing. And 1 week later, the remains were positively identified as belonging to William Earl Moult. The vehicle had been visible on Google Earth since 2007, but no one had noticed it until 2019. The police believe that William, while returning home from the club in 1997, most definitely lost control of his vehicle and drove into the pond. At the time of his disappearance, the housing complex surrounding the pond was under construction, and the car went undiscovered throughout the rest of the construction process. His family finally found closure after a long 22 years of disappearance. We hope you have learned something new watching this video. Comment down below if you have heard of a similar case that was solved by our internet heroes. Make sure to also subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon to get updated. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.